Ladies and gentlemen, today is January 13th, 2015, and this is the KNKL Show, episode 205. I'm your host, Keaton Lafferty, and today is Tutorial Tuesday, and we're going to be not doing so much a tutorial, but another Let's Paint. And today we are going to be focusing on something I've been working on over the past couple weeks, and that is Ahri. This beautiful Ahri picture over here. And today we're going to be going into detail about my painting process for this portrait study, as well as a little bit of what went into making these thumbnails, because we're basically setting it up as a splash. And if you guys are joining me on the live streams during the week, you guys get to be the producers, and I am the artist, so you guys get to be my boss. Fancy that. Fancy that. But before we get into that good stuff, we got to take a special trip over to a very special place, and that is the lovely Lane. So thank you guys so much once again for submitting all of your awesome artwork. If you'd like to see all these things for yourself, you can click that little, or you can go to the tiny URL right there, or if you're watching this on the archive on YouTube, you can click the link down in the description. You can see all of the awesome submissions. Join, like, submit them yourself, and become part of the community, and come get some cookies. All right. So now let's go ahead and get into the time lapse, which I have oh so conveniently pulled up this time because I'm awesome and I know what I'm doing at all times here on the KNKL Show. We are totally professional, never make any mistakes, and we're going to go ahead and get into that. All right. So for the people that have been joining me live, you will know that I have kind of gone into a little bit of this, but this is just for people on YouTube that maybe live in Poland that are not crazy enough to stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning to watch this and just want to kind of check this out. So we are going to be drawing Ahri. So the reason why I even started doing this was because of the recent splash update to Ahri in League of Legends. And as many of you know, as of today, they finally released like a new updated version, but prior to that, a lot of people really didn't like it, and they like reverted it back to the old splash, which was, I mean, I'm biased because it's obviously my art, so I was like, yeah, you can't beat the original artist, you can't beat the original Ahri, nothing can touch the original Ahri, right? So, but regardless, I thought, hey, you know what would be really cool is to, now that that splash has been released, what would be really cool and a way to avoid getting fired from breaching NDA is we should make a splash for ourselves, right? And like, it's just, I'll call it fan art, right? It's just fan art, and like, I'm not commissioned at all by Riot to do this, and it's just going to be sort of fun, but we're going to lay it out. I'm going to take you through the entire process that a splash artist would go through. That way, a lot of you have been asking for me to do this, and you guys can see the process, you can see my techniques, and all that good stuff. So one of the first things that I always like to do when I got into doing these splashes was whatever character I would be working with, especially if it was a female, I would always do a facial study at the very beginning, because it was really important for me to have my females all looking very unique and sort of having very distinct faces, right? And Ahri, out of all of them, was really cool because she has a much rounder face, much more oriental looking, right? Originally she was modeled off of for like Korea. We wanted her to look Korean. So, yeah, it was really fun just kind of playing around with that. I think she has like really big eyes though, which are very kind of mysterious and kind of alluring that I really like. And on top of that, she has fox ears. I'm usually not into furries, but in Ahri's case, I guess, you know, I'll make an exception. Why not? So, but yeah, I would start with a facial study on all these things. And then one of the things that I really like to do, here, let me go back a little bit. So one of the things that I really like to do is, you'll notice over here in my layers, the way that I've got it set up here is that you've got the lines up in front. You got the lines right up in front. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop some gray values right behind it. I'm going to start to erase out and kind of create a little bit of it just helps to add depth. So you'll notice I kind of like size up all the lines. And basically this is my animation cell technique, where you can see I'm laying down all of these colors behind the actual lines. Like the gray that you're seeing behind these lines is actually you seeing through that layer to the back. Okay, so you can add in colors, you can paint the lines, you can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. But it's a really versatile technique, And you can see I'm laying in the gray here, and I'm just erasing out to create my values. I'm just adding and subtracting. That's all I'm ever doing on these paintings. And it's very, very nice. And working in Grayscale is actually very relaxing because you don't have to worry about all the subtle changes and subsurface scattering and speculars and all that crap on the skin. You can just like paint gray, you can paint what looks good, and you can find a face that looks good for you. And we like that. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, now I'm starting to move into overpainting because after the stream ended, I wanted to make some slight adjustments to like her nose and overall to her face. And I'm going to do something in this painting that I don't normally do, and that's to use the liquify tool. Because I always try my best not to rely on the liquify tool because I kind of feel like it's a crutch, and if you're not careful, you can kind of get stuck on it. And like when you're doing something with physical media, obviously you can't like drop it in the physical, or the you can't drop it in the liquify layer, or you can't drop the liquify filter on it and like just warp it around necessarily, unless you're working with like really, I don't know, like moist acrylic, and you can kind of like smear the person's face over really quick, but that's highly unlikely unless you're working very quickly, very fast. So what I'm doing here is I am actually bringing her eyes a little bit forward, making the nose a little bit smaller and more like flat on the bottom, just to give her a little bit more of a Korean look. And yes, we like that. And yeah, just kind of like smoothing out everything, smoothing out the skin. Just really starting to just overpaint. I'm not too concerned about like having the lines be preserved in this. Normally I do a slightly different technique, but since I'm just working Grayscale, like I'm fine with just going straight to overpainting and just kind of getting a little bit, I don't know, I would call this a little like sloppy. It's getting a little messy, right? You're just kind of throwing on whatever you want to do. If this was the actual line art for the splash, you'll notice as we move forward, we're going to be working with a slightly different technique. And I know you can like hear the congestion in my throat. I'm still recovering from a cold. And we don't really like that. But you know what's actually interesting is that you can see what I'm doing here in the liquify tool. You can see when I drop it in. See how I'm moving her eyes upward. And this is like a weird glitch. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen this happen, but if you don't have like a background layer, if you don't merge those lines with a background layer to liquify tool, it will like do this weird thing where it's like a box and then it'll like lighten everything. And I didn't really like that. I don't know if that's like a preset on my Photoshop or if it's like a glitch that never got resolved. But at any rate, I don't really like that because it makes me have to like merge everything onto one layer before I can start liquifying it around. So, moving on to the thumbnails. The thumbnails! This is what we were doing this yesterday morning. And for those of you who are interested, I am actually doing now consistent streams during the morning. So if you live in Poland and you want to tune into a stream, Monday morning around, I don't know, like 10 o'clock my time, which I don't, it's, I'm Central Mountain Time. And I don't know how that correlates with you way the heck over there in Poland. But it is a lot better for you. So you can join me on Monday mornings for that. And it'll be freaking awesome. But this is what I was doing on Monday. So I was basically doing a live sketch with the people on the stream, and you'll probably see some silliness as we go through it because you know me, I like to go off on crazy tangents and do some silly stuff, but we're just kind of exploring all of these different thumbnails, right? You can see we got Ahri, but she has like Urgot's face mask on it. I don't know exactly why I did that, but it looked like Urgot. But you can see this is really how my thumbnails start. You can see how simple my thumbnails start as. And it's really just finding flow, kind of working with shapes, and keeping things very, very super loose. Loosey-goosey is the way to start it. And this is actually something that I have to constantly remind myself about because it's very easy for me to get caught up in wanting everything to be perfect right off the beginning. And I know this is something that you struggle with too. You want everything to be perfect right from the very beginning. So you like start like making your thumbnails, trying to make sure all the values are perfect, all your lines are perfect, the perspective is perfect right on, you know, and like I constantly struggle with this. And even when I'm doing the comic, when I'm doing Emma, it's very hard for me to like when I'm laying in like sketches and layouts and stuff, I want it all to look perfect right off the bat. But actually what's very important about staying loose in this stage is that your best ideas will come to you when you just kind of let your lines flow and you're not too concerned about everything looking perfect. And yeah, it's almost like you got to have like I hate the term happy accidents. I hate to use it, but it just sounds so dumb. I really, like, if you ever want to piss me off, just say happy accidents in front of me. I'm going to be like, ugh, I hate that term. But that's basically what we're going for here. You're trying to find those happy accidents. But I call it using the force of the artist. That's much better. You're letting the force of the artist naturally come about. There's no accidents. You're a professional. You don't rely on accidents. You are a professional, and you rely on clear intent, and you make awesome thumbnails because you intended it and use the force of the artist. So anyway, so we were taking breaks, and one of the things that really helps me out when I am working on these things here is coming up with keywords that will characterize and basically describe what Ahri is going to be, what the character is going to be in the splash, and what feeling I want to give to the player. This is a really important thing that we would do every time we'd get together as a splash team during the meetings at the end of the day. We would ask, okay, what is this character all about? How do we want the player to feel? How are we going to communicate what this character does in the game through the splash, right? So for Ahri, her keywords are dark, mysterious, sexy, and alluring, right? But she's also very powerful and kind of like cunning as a fox. So I wanted to make sure that I showed all three of those keywords in my splash. So, and I think what I end up doing is I was talking about like Soul Reaver Ahri or something like that, and I decided to do one more thumbnail, which is, I mean, this is obviously the best one. We're going to go with it. And this is a technique that I described as, okay, so it's like the day of, the splash needs to be done, and you got like 4 hours to go. So what we do is we just grab an image, right, that already has what we want it to be, and then we just kind of paint over it and just make it into a splash. I mean, I'm sure you've seen many other splashes that are just blatant copies of other poses from movies and stuff, but and of course I'm kidding. We never do that. But just as a joke on the stream, that's what I did. So here we have Soul Reaver Ahri. And yeah, I guess I took a break and forgot to hit the time lapse back on. Okay, there we go. All right, so now what you're going to see me doing is I took a break, and now I'm going to start coming back in and circling basically which thumbnails stand out most to me as hitting those keywords, and I'm just crossing off the rest of them. And you'll notice I've done about 9 thumbnails here, but they're all really like super loose and everything. Oh, right, look at this. Okay, so that skull that I drew right there, this is what we call the dead zone. This is the dead zone of a splash. Very, very important that you don't have important things happening here. It's very important that you don't have important things happening there, because this is, if you know, when you're in the game, this is where the UI, like the little spell thing that comes up, it's like power, versatility. I don't even remember what it is. It's like spells, attack, difficulty. It's like, who actually who decides how difficult a character is to play? Because like Maokai's like really difficult to play, but I don't think they say it's really difficult, but he's not difficult at all. Anyway, but maybe that's because I play him a lot. But anyway, so that's where all the UI is. Here's where all the skin cards are. So you don't want to have like the character's source of power, i.e. Ahri's ball, right in the dead zone being covered up by all that UI, because it's going to look dumb and it's going to look really like weird. So you don't want to do that. All right. I'm seriously considering going and blowing my nose. I'm probably going to do that. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, sorry to step away during the stream, but hey, that's what you get when you get congested Keenan. Congested Keenan on the KNKL show. But yeah, I kept the time lapse running, and this is basically how I begin to start refining the thumbnails. So let's go back and like watch this one again. So you can see how it started like this. All the basic shapes are there. I'm kind of like lassoing it, moving it around, and then I'll kind of set it there. And then what I start doing is I start playing around a little bit more with values. Start adding in values, and I think at one point during the stream I was like, okay, I really want this to be sort of like a backlit piece, so we can see the glowing of Ahri's eyes. So I want her skin and like her overall shape to be very like a dark value on top of a light background, and then that way we can get sort of like this cool, mysterious, ominous effect, which I think is really big with like Ahri's lore. That's kind of what she represents. So you can see me just kind of like drawing in, laying in values and kind of defining shapes, defining anatomy, but still keeping it very, very simple, and like messing around with things like such as like the hand. The hands are really important because there's a big difference between a spell being cast like this, being cast like that, and like that. You know, they all say different things about what the character is. So we wanted to, I was experimenting with a bunch of different hands. You guys have heard me say this many times before, but the face, like the facial expression on your character, as well as the hands, are the two biggest telling points about what that character is, what that character's feeling. And it can really be a big place to describe and tell a story. So I want to make sure that you guys are paying close attention to not only the facial expressions, but your character's hands. Please pay attention to the character's hands. In fact, that's probably a whole nother tutorial that we could go into in depth, is like hands continued. We've done one on hands, but we should do one on expressive hands. Expressive hands. That would be actually really cool. I really want to do that. So we are nearing the end of the time lapse. So I would like to ask you guys in the chat who can see. Actually, the stream looks like there have been some issues with Twitch lately, but if you can see the stream, please feel free to get your questions ready because I'll take a couple. And then we're going to end today's show. But yeah, that was the end of the time lapse, and that brings us to right here. So I'm really digging this. So far, what I'm really resonating with is, well, obviously number 9 is the best because it's like super kawaii, super cute. And we get pink hair Ahri. But if we had to be a little more realistic, a little more safe, maybe the community isn't ready for this yet, we'd go for number 8 or number 6. Now, the reason why I like number 6, and I said this on the stream on Monday, was because it's set up in a way that the camera is close to the character. And something that's really cool to do is that this is something that I just recently started kind of learning about. I was like, how come sometimes in pictures, like where they draw the hand like really close to you and it's like taking up like 90% of the screen like this, how come sometimes that looks natural and other times it looks forced and kind of weird? And the reason why is because it's the relative position of the camera to the character. So you'll notice right now, this camera is probably about 2 feet away from me. So if I stretch my fist or like my hand towards you, see how it can take up a lot of the screen? But notice how if I sit back a little bit and I do that same thing, see how like now my hand is much more relative to my face? It's much more, it's not as exaggerated because of the relative distance from the camera to the character. So that's why when the character is like far away and then sometimes they have like the hand like way up here, it looks really strange. So going back to why I like number 6, because we've set up the camera in a way that we're very, very close to Ahri already. So we can have a really cool effect of feeling like the camera is set up close, i.e. our eyes, we're very close to Ahri, and her arm can like come towards us, and like her hips and like her sexy leg can be there. And it'll be really awesome and engaging. And that's one of the biggest things that we would strive for. We'd always say we want the player to feel like they're there with the character, like they're very, very close to the character. And one of the ways that we do that is by setting it up so that way the camera is close. All right, with all that out of the way, it's time to move into the question catapult. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please cast your questions over the castle walls as has been instructed in the video, and I will answer them. We already got a couple coming in. Someone is asking, Imagine Artist is asking, did you have anything to do with Tristana's visual update? If so, will you do a process video like you did with Maokai's? I personally did not have anything to do with Tristana's visual update in the game. That was done by an artist by the name of Gem Lim. Gem, Gemlim. She's an amazing artist working at Riot. I was a coworker back when she was working with me back when I was in-house. But now that I'm working from my own office, she's working on that. But one thing I will say is that some of the Yordle explorations that you guys saw me doing and some of those fan art things that I did, like this one of Poppy here, I did one for all the other Yordle girls as well. And Tristana's, let's say it may have influenced or maybe inspired something as far as the Yordle unification process. But I really like what Gem did with Tristana. It's super cute, super awesome. And my hat's off to her. But no, I did not personally work on that The latest one that I did that came out was Maokai's, and if you guys haven't seen that one, the visual update process, I did do a YouTube video on that. You guys go check that out, and I encourage you to. Go check it out. All right, next question. Aaron Pinel's asking, what types of things do you think about when you're creating your base shapes? Great question, Aaron. And it's good to see you again, by the way. The things that I'm thinking about mostly when I'm creating these base shapes are mostly how it's going to complement and like frame the piece. So you'll notice one of the reasons why I really liked number 8 was because these shapes of her tails, I was using these as a way to bring us back into the picture, right? So it sweeps around and it pulls us back to this main focal point. And I'm always thinking about that. Always thinking about lines that are going to lead us right back to our focal point, which is usually going to be the character's face, just the character in general. And just having everything kind of set up that way. This one kind of does it, but you'll notice this is exactly what I'm talking about. See how the camera is much further away from the character? And now immediately we feel a lot more disconnected because she's so small and far away from us. Whereas with this, she's like right up on us. And it's so much more powerful and cool feeling. So, but yeah, basically all of my shapes and all of my things, they all have to do with flow. And I almost focus more on the flow of it. Like you'll notice like the anatomy in here is like way off. Like this arm's like massive and like this leg is like huge, but like I'm not really worried about that. I'm just focused on getting basic shapes down and having the force of the artist flow through me, and good things will happen. All right, last question. Ron5555 is asking, what are ways to practice anatomy as I have difficulty with scales of the body? A great way to practice anatomy, I think I did a show on this, and that was, I want to ask you first off, if you're trying to draw anatomy off of the head, like for example, I'll show you here. So are you trying to draw a body off of the head like this? Because this is probably the most common thing that I see people do. This is a common mistake. They'll draw the head like this, and then they'll be like, all right, time to draw the body. All right, okay, so yeah, you got like some shoulders here, maybe like that, and then what happens is very quickly your proportions will get off because you didn't consider them from the very beginning. So you end up kind of having this guy with like a long arm, and then his legs like kind of end like down here, and your proportions are all off. Okay, but one thing that I would really highly suggest to you is that if you're focusing on body and learning anatomy, first of all, get some good reference pictures. Like there's awesome like look up sculptures, like clay sculptures of like superheroes or just musculature. It's really, really handy because the reason I like it is because sculptors tend to stylize the body just ever so slightly. It works really good when you're doing this type of stuff. And it's very, very clear to see when someone sculpts in clay what's happening. So what I would suggest that you do is when you're drawing bodies, like instead of drawing a detailed head, just draw a quick head, right? And then say, one thing that I really like to do is I will measure things off of the head. And I know you've heard this before many, many times. You always want to just measure off the head. And what I do is actually just take my fingers and I will just literally put them up to the screen and go like one down. I know that's like the chest line. Another one down, that's like the belly button. Third one down is like the crotch, right? And then you just keep working your way down. And that is a great way to create your proportions. And then you have a proportionate man who hopefully looks a little bit better than this. But you know what I'm saying. Proportion things off of the head and draw the body first if it's going to be a full body shot. And that is going to wrap up episode 205 of the KNKL show. So thank you guys once again for joining me live on Twitch. This is going to be up on YouTube. You guys like it on there. Thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. My name is Keenan Lafferty. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, take care.